Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Russia once again for the first time in what feels like a good little while. We're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. The last beer that I had from this brewery was really nice, very impressive beer, actually big barrel-aged Imperial Porter, but the one that we're going to have a look at today seems to be one of their more kind of regular or core range beers, I guess we could say. So quite curious to see what it's going to have in store for us because I have heard good things about it. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to Voronezh, which is in the kind of, I guess you could say, I'm not sure if you can say southwest Russia, but it's quite close to the Ukrainian border anyway. And we're going to have a look at another beer from Brewlok Brewery. So this particular beer is called Sotnya. It comes in at 8.6% ABV, and this one is a porter. Although at 8.6% ABV, I think we could consider that an Imperial porter, or maybe an export porter at the very least. I'm pretty sure that rule, that kind of thing that's rumoured in Russia, that anything under 10% is considered as a soft drink, is true. So yeah, maybe that's why they're calling this one a porter. Maybe anything over 10% in Russia is considered an imperial measure, if you like. But yeah, this should be quite interesting. The last beer that I had from Brewlok, of course, was one of the Imperial Porters in the Dostoyevsky range that they do, the big barrel aged series, and it was Tom 6, if I remember rightly. And yeah, that was a pretty damn nice beer. So when I saw this one was being released through the Tillfälligt assortment in Systembolaget here in Sweden, I thought, we have to have a go at this and have a look at another beer from Brewlok Brewery. But we've had a fairly steady stream of Russian beers over the last kind of year or so, so long may that continue. As I say, the quality of the Russian stuff that I've had so far has been pretty damn good actually. But let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brewlok Brewery before, and we will see about adding more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Russian beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Brewlok Brewery then. So Brewlok Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Voronezh in southwestern Russia, quite close to the Ukrainian border. So the brewery was founded back in 2015 by two friends. This is Maxim Bushin and Stanislav Belov, but there are apparently another two co-owners in the brewery as well, but when I was writing the notes I couldn't find out who they were. But anyway, so Stanislav comes from a background in sales and marketing, and he takes care of that side of the brewery, whereas Maxim is the chief brewer and technologist, and he has a dedicated brewing education but also studied science for a little bit at university before this. But he previously interned with both Velka Morava and One Ton in Russia, as well as a few breweries in Germany, before he moved on and started his own company of Brewlok. So the first beer they produced was a Pilsner, and over the years they've continued to develop new recipes. The brew kit that they have comes from Mini Brewing System in Czech Republic, and they say they can produce around 20 tons of beer per month, which translates roughly to around 20,000 litres. I'm not sure exactly why in Russia they use tons to measure the output of beer, but that's just what you find on the different kind of blogging websites and stuff like that. But these days they've got an on-site tap room, and as of February 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 280 different kinds of beer. So yeah, these guys are a pretty damn prolific brewery. 280 beers, when you consider they've been around for what, like 6 or 7 years, that is pretty impressive actually. A good couple of beers coming out every year, actually 2 or 3 a month, come to think of it. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Brewlok Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. Since it's a Russian brewery as well, they do have a VK page. And of course, if you want to learn a little bit more about all the different beers, you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about those. But yeah, that's everything at the moment that we need to say about Brewlok Brewery. We can go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, it's quite interesting. So the name Sotnya, if I remember my Russian correctly from the course that I did, I think that means 100. But to be honest, I'm not sure how that relates to the sort of cavalry picture that we're seeing in here. These guys look like one of the kind of Far East Russian regiments of the Red Army or whatever. But yeah, that, I don't know, that uniform looks a little bit more like a kind of Imperial Russia era army era uniform, if that makes sense. But anyway, yeah, if you're watching from Russia, do let me know about this, because there was nothing on the website about what this beer was named after or anything like that. I couldn't find very much information. The Untappd page didn't have any information about the name either. But there you can see the Brewlok bottle cap, which is quite nice, very similar to the brewery symbol. This one was released as part of the Tillfälligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden, the temporary assortment in February of 2022. It's a half-litre bottle, and I think I want to say that I paid maybe 50 Swedish kronor for this. So yeah, you know, about 10 kronor is going to go to the importer for bringing these in. But yeah, 50 Swedish kronor is about €5, somewhere in the region of like £4 sterling, I guess, and maybe in the region of like $6, something like that. So for a half litre of an 8.6% porter, I think that's pretty decent actually. But yeah, it looks pretty damn nice, I have to say. It tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here in Russian as well, but of course my Russian is nowhere near good enough to read that for you. But yeah, as I say, there wasn't too much had been translated about this beer on the Untappd page and so on. But yeah, 8.6% porter. This one I would call it an Imperial porter at 8.6, to be honest, or an export porter at the very least. But let's crack it open and see how we got on then. Curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. I don't review all that many porters these days, but yeah, it's mainly kind of Imperial stouts and things like that. So yeah, let's get this guy out and into the glass. Curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. But yeah, I've had some awesome Imperial stouts from Russia actually. My first encounter with Russian beer was back in about 2015 or 2016 when Malmö Brewing Company here hosted a Russian beer festival, and I think there was about 15 or so Russian breweries came across, and I was very impressed with the standard then. And then more recently, my friend Hannah went to Moscow, and she went to Moscow and brought me back some Russian beers. And then within a month or two actually, those same Russian breweries that I tried were exporting to Copenhagen, so I was able to get even more of them. And then they appeared over here in Sweden too, which was pretty crazy. So yeah, as I say, quality of Russian beer in my experience tends to be pretty damn good. So yeah, anyway, as you can see, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect for an Imperial porter or a porter of any description. So the head on this one is about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium tan head. There's a few bigger bubbles towards the bottom there, but it's certainly more fluffy on the top. There's one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones kind of moving up toward the bottom of the head there. But yeah, it looks pretty good. In terms of colour, we're definitely talking a black ebony rosewood sort of thing. And remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining the EBC rating of your beer. This one will have a load of black malts or, you know, Carafa, Special B, something like that in it. The Russians, of course, probably produce their own malts, so it's maybe a bunch of Russian varieties that I've never heard of before. But yeah, the length of the wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, will of course affect the colour of the beer as well. But when it comes to the kind of black beers like this, it is quite difficult to overcome the influence of the darker malts, should we say. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from an Imperial porter with appearance, this one doesn't really surprise, I have to say. So yeah, I think this goes together very, very nicely. So yeah, let's crack on with the aroma and see how we go. Nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this beer. So, aroma time. Yeah, that is pretty nice. Very, very old school smelling Imperial Porter, this one. But very smooth at the same time, actually. Yeah. I mean, some porters can be, you know, kind of sweet and things like this. Some of them can be a little bit more roasty and toasty. But this one smells as if it's going to kind of straddle the border, actually. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us, actually, this one. But yeah, aroma wise, this is very, very nice. So let's break it down for you and describe it a wee bit more, kind of in depth, should we say. So the backbone of this beer, I definitely get a little bit of woodiness to it, which is nice. Yeah, there's a lovely little bit of woodiness in there. There's some smooth kind of bread crusty. There's definitely a little bit of that smooth bread crusty character in there as well, and that's forming the backbone of the beer. I don't find this one to be overly dry in the aroma, and that's why I said it comes across as quite smooth. You don't get too much in the way of black malt, but yeah, as I say, there's quite a woody backbone to it for me, some kind of slightly toasty brown bread crust, almost a little bit of a sweet kind of German type rye bread sort of thing going on as well. But yeah, when you take the aroma in more deeply, you do get a little bit of that kind of black malt, Carafa, Special B, whatever. You do get a little bit of that type of roasty dryness out of the beer. So that's quite interesting, actually. So, aroma-wise, this is pretty nice. On top of that, there's I do get a little bit of chocolate out of it. You know, there's a wee bit of a kind of maybe 60% cocoa chocolate to this one. Yeah, 50-60% cocoa chocolate. It's got a wee bit of dryness to it, but not really a milky character. So yeah, I would say about 60% cocoa chocolate. Some nice brown sugary elements as well. Yeah, there's a nice wee bit of brown sugary character in there too. Some more, you get a little bit of an almost leathery character out of the brown sugars in this, and that would indicate to me that the beer's had a little bit of a longer wort boil. When you boil the wort a little bit more, the brown sugars just kind of flatten out a little bit and give you this little bit of leathery character. At the same time, there's a bit of toastiness to the brown sugar and a wee bit of sweetness too. So yeah, this is an interesting beer. Woodiness, bready character. Yeah, woodiness, bready character. A little bit of a kind of little bit of an, as we say, more a little bit of a more kind of just sweet. There's a bit of bready sweetness comes out of it as well, but a little bit of a kind of medium chocolate, 60% cocoa, leathery brown sugars, bit of toastiness in there, and a wee bit of sweetness. But overall, this is a really quite nice beer in that sense, and from the malty side of things and the aroma, it goes together really well. Let's focus on the hoppy and fruity side of things then. I don't think there's anything else we need to say about the about that malty yeasty side of it. So on the hoppy side of things, it's kind of as you'd expect. I get a fair little bit of grassiness out of it, but the grassiness is quite smooth. There's definitely a wee bit of earthy character to it, and a little bit of there's a little bit of earthiness in there. A wee bit of a herbal character as well. The hoppy character in this beer is quite smooth. By the looks of it, it says it's best from a year after the bottling date, and the bottling date on this one, or the best before date, is the 17th of the 17th of the 1st, 2022. That's interesting, actually. Have I read that right? Yeah, Date Rose. Rosliva, Data Rosliva. So yeah, it says it's best before the 17th of the 1st, 22. So this beer's actually out of date. That's interesting. That makes sense as to why the hops are so smooth. Now, what I will say though is that as an 8.6% porter, it will be all right. So we're drinking this beer actually, and this is kind of interesting that this got past Systembolaget. The importer for this beer, by the way, is Russian influence. This is interesting that this got past Systembolaget. That it's because it's out. This beer is out of date. If that is when it's produced, but it does say it's best before 365 days after the date on the thing. So yeah, maybe I've made a mistake there. Maybe it is that's when it's been bottled or whatever. So interesting. Right, we'll need to see. This is always the fun thing when you get some of these big dark beers from Thingway, because I was wondering. The thing is, the hoppy character in this one is very, very smooth, and you know, often after the beer has been in the after the beer has been in the bottle for a while, you will start to get the hoppy characters dropping out of it. So that's an interesting thing there. I wish my Russian was good enough to know what was going on there. But yeah, it does say on the import sticker that it's best before 365 days after the thing, because usually it's a best before date that's on the bottle. But maybe in Russia they do it in the sense that it's a bottled on date, and that would kind of make sense when it's a big dark beer like this. But yeah, the hoppy character in this one is quite smooth. There's a bit of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal character, a wee bit of floral note, but yeah, quite a bit of grassiness kind of lingering there. But it is very smooth. On the fruity side of things, it's kind of interesting because you get a little bit. That was one of the other things. You get a little bit of an almost kind of slightly oxidised red fruit in this, and that was one of the other things that was making me wonder: is this beer still in date? But yeah, you get a little bit of a kind of cakey sort of brownie note out of this one, and then on top of that you get some fruity notes. So for me there is a wee bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness. Yeah, there's a wee bit of a sort of raisiny sharpness in there, and there's quite a bit of a figgy character as well, which is interesting. Yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of there is a little bit of a kind of more oily figgy character in there, and a wee bit of blackberry as well. So I'm curious to see how that's going to translate into the flavour itself. But yeah, a few interesting things going on in the aroma there, and obviously the thing with the date is interesting too. I should point out as well that this beer contains wheat, so that kind of makes sense, because it is actually, when we shine the light through this one, it is pretty opaque. It has got a little bit of a kind of hazy sort of character going on with it. But yeah, interesting stuff. So let's leave it at that for the aroma. As I always say though, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in, but I think it's about time that we try this one. So this is the Sotnya, an 8.6% porter from Brewlok Brewery in Voronezh in Russia. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanja, skål, cheers, na zdrowie. Oh yeah, that is pretty nice, I have to say. Yeah. Now, first impression of this one is it's actually quite light bodied, and the carbonation, it actually has a fair little bit of carbonation to it, and that is another thing that makes me wonder about the date that's on the bottle as well, because you know, if it's you can see there's a little bit of sediment at the bottom of the bottle there, and when a beer, that is one of the things with secondary fermentation, is you will get a little bit more carbonation out of the beer, right enough. But yeah, this one, it's got, the carbonation is quite active in it, and it must have been sitting for a little while for it to do that. So yeah, it's another interesting point, as we say. But in terms of the flavour, this beer is pretty damn solid, and as I say, we've had some good experiences with the Russian craft breweries so far, so I'm not surprised. The Dostoevsky one that we had before as well was pretty damn impressive. So yeah, this is a nice continuation of that. We're obviously learning that Brewlok can do their dark beers well, so I think the next one we do from these guys will have to be something a little bit lighter. But yeah, let's keep going with this then. A lovely, slightly sweet, but still quite smooth porter in a lot of ways. So, yeah, where do we start with this one? This is nice. So, it is a little bit different from what I thought it was going to be with the flavour, but yeah, we'll get on with this. So, let's focus on the middle third of your palate just now. The base the base of that middle third of your palate, you can feel a nice little bit of a kind of roasty, toasty, bread crusty character there. That goes together very nicely. That forms the backbone of the beer. And as I say, it's maybe black malt or Carafa Special B, something like that. It's a little bit hard to say. But what you get toward the front of that middle third of your palate is a nice little bit of a smooth, kind of woody character. It's almost got a wee touch of nuttiness to it as well. But yeah, backbone of this beer is a toasty, well-fired bread crust with a wee bit of nuttiness on top of it. On top of that, you get a nice kind of smooth brown rye bready sort of thing out of it. So that goes together really quite nicely as well. The bready character it develops a wee bit of a sweetness the further you go into the beer too. Yeah, that is interesting. So yeah, you've got a really nice little bit of sweetness coming out of this. You've got a nice little bit of sweetness coming out of the beer too. So yeah, you've got the base of like a sweet rye bready note there, and I'll add to that it's not overly thick. And remember, that is the main difference between a porter and a stout. The porter is basically a lighter bodied version of a stout, uses a different yeast strain, of course. But yeah, the porters are basically lighter versions of the stout, and yeah, you can feel that nice little bit of a light rye bready sort of note there, and then you've got the other stuff kind of sitting on top of it. So on top of the bready layer, you've got a little bit of you've got a little bit of a kind of chocolatey note out of it. So the chocolatey notes in this one are quite interesting. The beer does have a really quite kind of interesting sweetness in the middle of the palate though. But yeah, toward the on the back, at the back of that middle third of your palate, you do get quite a roasty, toasty, chocolatey character out of this one. So it's maybe like an 80-90% cocoa, but then as you move further forward, you get more. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of a more you can feel it sort of mellowing out and sweetening up a little bit. So you start to get a more kind of 60%. It's about 80 or 90% cocoa in the back of that the middle third of your palate. Then it goes to about 60%. So it does stay on that kind of higher cocoa end of the spectrum for sure. And it dries out in the middle too, which I think is really nice. But yeah, sitting on top of the chocolatey side of things is quite nice. You've also got a little bit of a kind of roasty, toasty, brown sugary sort of thing to this one as well. So that forms the base of the the kind of sweeter side of things. So you get a bit of a, on top of the chocolate, a bit of a roasty, toasty brown sugar. I don't get so much in the way of leathery character out of this one until the aftertaste. So you get a little bit of that leathery brown sugary note in the aftertaste, but right in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a wee bit of a kind of sweet caramelly sort of thing to this one as well. So it's an interesting beer, this one. There's quite a few layers to it for sure. And you'll find that when you take the liquid in, it's actually very sweet in the middle of the palate. And you almost get a bit of fruitiness in the very centre of your palate too, which is interesting, like this kind of red fruitiness. So yeah, I'd be very curious to know where that comes from. I think probably just going by how unusual the flavour is, I wonder if this is maybe like a very old school yeast or something like that they're using here. Maybe they've got a very old school like Russian porter yeast or something like this that they're using in there. Because the other one, I remember thinking with the Dostoevsky that we had that it was pretty unique. So yeah, it's quite an interesting. It is quite an interesting thing with this one. So yeah. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate. Let's focus on the other parts of the beer. Border region between middle and back third of the palate. Then you get a little bit of a bready build up in there with a wee bit of bread crust. Then the base of that back third of your palate, you've got a bit more of a kind of roasty, toasty sort of thing going on. So yeah, the roasty, well-fired bread crust is a bit more intense on the back of the palate there. But on top of that, you get a nice thicker brown bready layer to the beer. And yeah, the brown bread is a little bit grainier, of course, too. Then sitting on top of that, you have a very nice kind of, you can feel that some of the kind of chocolatey bit of the beer, that actually creeps into the back of the back third of the palate a little bit too. And then sitting on top of all of that, it has a little bit of a more, it does have a wee bit of a more kind of yeasty sort of thing. So that's, yeah, there's some interesting things going on in this one. So on top of that, you have the kind of yeasty character with this one. So the yeasty character for me, it's actually just like a slightly more dense brown bready character with a wee bit more bread crusty note coming out of it. So you can feel that just sitting on the top of the back third of your palate, and on the back third of your palate you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. Then as you come further forward, the flavour just condenses down a little bit and squashes together a wee bit more. So again, I quite like how that goes together in this beer. It's a thumbs up from me. But I think that is everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of things with this one. So let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer and the fruity side of things now. So back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it gets a little touch of a kind of herbally character, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, it's got a bit of a smooth but slightly floral note to it, which is interesting. Round the front curve of the palate, there's a little bit of grassiness in there, and it has a wee touch of zest to it, which is quite interesting. And from the green component in this one, I do wonder if it is maybe some kind of Russian hop they're using in this. And of course, Russian hops are not something that I'm familiar with at all. You know, New Zealand, European, or American hops, yes, but Russian hops I've got no idea about. I know they exist, and I'm sure I've seen quite a few of the hops. There are one or two of the hops that we've encountered from New Zealand and things like that have been derived from like a Russian variety. But yeah, it feels, the hoppy character in this one does feel a little bit different. So I'd be curious to know what the hop profile of this beer is. But anyway, on the fruity side of things then, let's focus on the front third of the palate. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up there. The base of the front third of your palate is a little bit more kind of smooth, and it's a little bit more kind of smooth and bready. You get a wee bit of woodiness in there as well, and then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. But I will say toward the back of that front third of your palate, you get a sort of cakey, fruit loafy, brownie sort of thing coming out of it. So, sitting on top of that, you have a nice it's actually quite a sharp fruity character you get with this one. At the top, on the top of the back third, on the top of the back half of that front third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a more kind of sharp raisiny sort of thing. Underneath that there is a little bit of a plummy note, but I actually think it's quite a sharp raisiny note. Then the base is like a kind of oily figgy character, and as you move further forward into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's a little bit more kind of it is a wee bit more, I would say, kind of sharp in a sense. So that's pretty interesting too. So yeah, sharp raisins at the back, kind of oily fig underneath, but then as you move further forward, the front half of that front third of your palate is definitely more like a kind of sharp blackberry coming out of it. But yeah, this is a really interesting beer. This one quite different from any of the other porters that I can think I've had on the channel over the last nearly 9 years now. It's crazy to think that the channel's nearly 9 years old, man. Insane. But yeah, it's a nice porter, this one. It was a bit strange at first, but it has grown on me the more that I've drunk of it. So yeah, the way that this goes together is pretty interesting. So it gets a thumbs up from me. On the, I think we can move on to the mouthfeel then. So for me, it's the mouthfeel is what you'd expect from a porter. It doesn't feel any thicker or any lighter than I would expect of the style. But so I describe this beer overall as kind of mid-bodied. Carbonation is a little bit more active, right enough, and that was one of the things that caused me a little bit of confusion with the date on this one, because it is bottle fermented. So yeah, that's a bit of an interesting point with this one. It is a little bit over carbonated potentially. They maybe need to look at that. But in terms of IBUs, I think this one is maybe about a 60, 70 IBU beer, somewhere in that region. Some of that's coming from the malt, some of it is coming from the hops as well, right enough. The malt base has a bit of roastiness underneath, a bit of smoothness in the middle, and a wee touch of sweetness on top. You've got a lovely fruity character to it as well. And yeah, the way that all of that goes together is very, very nice. Yeah, quite a sharp fruity character as well, which is interesting. And the sharpness of the fruity character made me wonder a little bit about oxidation. And again, that was going back to the kind of date. Pardon me, the date that I was talking about with this beer. But overall, it's been a really interesting review, this one. It's been nice to return to these guys and just think about another beer. But I would like to try a different style from them. Both of the beers I've tried now have been porters, and it's not a style I review very often, but these guys certainly know what they're doing with this style, which is good. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. I can feel the alcohol going to my head a little bit with this beer, and it's only 8.6% ABV. So yeah, Russian beers do have a bit of a kick to them, that's for sure. So yeah, this one was the Sotnya, an 8.6% porter from Brewlok Brewery in Voronezh in Western Russia. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brewlok, and we will return to these guys at some point soon. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you in the next review. Slanjit, Skull, cheers, na zdrowie.